Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Bound by Strength deck, which is one that I recently unboxed last week, I think it was. So I'm going to do the analysis now, so I'm going to break the deck down a bit more and look at the various interactions. The deck itself, if you're not familiar with it, uses the soul bound mechanic. That sort of shows off this soul bond ability in Avacyn Restored. It's a green-blue deck. It's very creature heavy. The mana base is basically 25 lands. They're all basic. There's 13 forests, 12 islands. I've just laid them out here so you can see the different artwork that they have. We've got a small amount of support cards which aren't creatures. A couple of joint assaults, an ice cage, 2 layered delves and an overrun. And then the creatures run from 1 mana up to 6 basically. So I'm going to go through some of the interactions on those as well. So starting off with our mana base, with this I think that the important thing to do is to play a few sample hands, see how the mana plays out, you know, whether or not you get colour screwed, and then decide how you want to fix this. The cheapest way cost wise you can fix a dual coloured deck like this is to use some evolving wilds in the deck. The downside with using these, and why it's important to actually find out if you're going to have any problems with, you know, colour as the deck stands, is that this will slow the deck down, because you have to, obviously you play them on your land drop, you can sacrifice them, you tap, sacrifice them, search out for a basic land card, but you put it into play tap, so it's going to slow the deck down. The other alternative is to use something which generates both colours. There is a card that's currently legal in standard that'll do that, and that is Hinterland Harbour. So that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest or an island. So it's obviously good when you've already got stuff in play, land in play, and you want to fix for the other colour that's not in play. And that taps for green or blue mana. In terms of other like non-basic lands which are currently legal in standard, because I'm going to mainly focus on, well, actually exclusively focus on standard legal cards when I'm talking about, you know, this intro deck, which is also legal currently in standard. But another interesting non-basic land that you can use, which doesn't generate any coloured mana, is Alchemist's Refuge. Taps for 1 colourless, and for a cost of a green and a blue you can tap it, and what it does is you can cast all non-land cards as though they had flash. So it'd be interesting to see how that might work in a deck such as this with a heavy creature base. So again, it's something more to experiment with. I'm not saying it's definitely going to work well, but I'd just be interested to see how inclusion of that non-basic land in the deck might help with the deck. Moving on to our support cards, we've got 2 joint assaults, which is a pump spell. It gives target creatures +2/+2, but more importantly, when they're soul bonded, it gives both of the creatures +2/+2. So that's where its real advantage is. It'll do both the soul bond creatures. We've got Ice Cage, which is allows us to enchant a creature so it can't attack or block, and it can't trigger its activated abilities. We have 2 layered delves, and I'll just bring this one up to the camera because I just want to compare this with something. So here we have a layered delve. So this is a green card draw where for 2 and a green we reveal the top 2 cards of our library. We put all creatures and land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of the library. So we've got card filtering going on here, but because we're a heavy creature deck, more often than not we're putting creatures and lands into our hand rather than putting anything else on the bottom of the deck. But we can compare this with something like a divination. So this is a blue card which is also legal in standard. It's from the core set M12, and this just lets us draw 2 cards straight. So regardless of what the card is, we get to put it into our hand. We don't have to reveal the card, but where filtering could be to our advantage, we don't have that on the card, so we can't use that. So with Lair Delve, it is really important that you decide the most appropriate time to play that if you want to use it for card draw. You don't want to end up sticking something at the bottom that would be really useful and then difficult to get hold of, such as an overrun. So overrun, and I'm sure anybody that's played Magic for a while will be familiar with this sort of card, particularly if you play green creatures. So creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. There's only one of these in the deck, so obviously you have to basically be careful at how this is used and played at the most appropriate time. You want to play this when you've got lots of creatures on the deck, and the math works out in terms of what your opponent has there that they could use to block, and how much damage is going to overspill onto them as a result of the trample on this. The reason why it's there, of course, is because we have a lot of creatures. So down the bottom here we've got mostly creatures in each part of the curve which don't have a soul bond ability, or don't specifically have a soul bond, although some of them will work with soul bond and need to work with soul bond. Because it's a green deck, not surprisingly we see a couple of Llanowar Elves to help generate green mana. That gives a bit of a mana boost. And then here we have in blue Nephilia Smuggler. Now this doesn't actually have soul bond on it, but it does interact with soul bond, because on its ability it's got 3 in a blue. You exile another target creature you control, then return that creature to the battlefield under your control. I believe this is called Flickering, and somewhere in the set, although I don't have it, there is a card that you can play which sort of just does this ability. So this is really important in Soul Bond, because Soul Bond is an into the battlefield ability. It allows you to rebond stuff. So it allows you to modify your bonding based on threats. Then our first soul bonder is Wingcrafter. This its soul bond ability is flying, so both itself and what it's bound to get flying. It's a 1/1 for 1 when it comes out, and like I said, the only thing it has here is flying, but that's pretty powerful when combined with some of the other creatures that you'll see, and we'll come on to where this sort of comes into play. We have a lonesome Runeclaw Bear here, 2/2 for 2, vanilla creature. So this is a one card where if you were looking to introduce other cards in, you could swap this out. You might have other soul bond creatures where you want to bump up the number in the deck, and you just exchange out with this. Or there could be other 2/2s or 2-drops which you have in mind, which may not be soul bond but might fit into the deck in some way. Would you want to play the phantasmal equivalent, the Phantasmal Bear, which is only 1 to cast for a 2/2, but the downside is it basically causes you basically have to sacrifice it when it becomes the target of a spell or ability. Interestingly enough, in the deck, because normally with a Phantasmal Bear you play it in a deck where one of the cards gives you hexproof, This deck does actually have a hexproof ability creature in it, which also has Soul Bond, which is Elgord's Shieldmate, which you could Soul Bond to the Phantasmal Bear to basically protect it if you needed to do that. The other problem with the Phantasmal Bear is, you know, if you start targeting stuff to flicker it or basically to rebond something else that it's bonded to, you're going to run into problems. So that it may not be that useful in the deck, but again, it's just something to sort of play around with, give you ideas for things. Nightshade Peddler. So with this, let me just try and get this into focus. This has Soul Bond on it. As long as Nightshade Peddler is paired with another creature, both creatures have Death Touch. So with Death Touch, that always sort of makes your opponent think about stuff very carefully, so they don't end up losing one of their creatures to a sort of badly planned attack or a badly planned block. So you know that it's interesting how Death Touch can be used as a sort of threat to try and almost like control an opponent's plays. We've got Latch Seeker, which doesn't have a Soul Bond ability on it, but does bond very well with other creatures that do, and we'll see in a moment how this would work. It's unblockable. It's a 3/1 for 1 and 2 blue. So what we're looking for are other cards that would work well with that unblockability. We've got a Wolfear Avenger here. Same sort of mana column. It's got flash on it. It's a 3/3 for 3, and for 1 and a green you can regenerate it. So this, you know, works well with some Soul Bonds where you want to quickly do a flash Soul Bond to, in effect, completely change the state of the board. It can really mess up stuff. Now the card that I was thinking of comboing off, if you like, with the Tandem Lookout, although it's not really a good use of the word, is this one, Tandem Lookout, which works well with Latch Seeker. So if you remember, Latch Seeker was unblockable. So with this one, the Soul Bond ability makes it so that whatever creature you pair with it, whenever the creature does damage to an opponent, you draw a card. Now, of course, one of the advantages with a creature being unblockable is that the damage is going to get through to the player. So if you use Tandem Lookout on a Latch Seeker and then swing with the Latch Seeker, it's pretty obvious you're going to get card draw, unless the opponent has some other way of removing that threat. So if you like, that's the sort of first real essential bonding Soul Bond to look for. We've got 3 Trusted Force Mages. There's a couple of cards in here, a few cards which their Soul Bond ability is based around Pump, and this is one such card. There's 3 of these. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a green, so fairly high cost for its power toughness, but when it's bonded it makes it a 3/3. Flowering Lumberknot can't do anything much unless it's Soul Bonded. This is a 5/5 for 3 and a green, but it can't attack or block unless it's paired, and there's 2 of those. Druid's Familiar is a 2/2 for 3 and a green, and another one with a Pump Soul Bond ability on it. For this one's got +2/+2. And so that really with those pump cards is you need to evaluate how effective they are going to be in play, and whether or not there are other soul bond cards in the deck where you would be worth having more of rather than having pumpable creatures. And that's something you just need to consider when you're sort of play testing with this deck. For instance, in this line here, your Druid's Familiar is going to work quite well attached to the Flowering Lumber Knot, because now you would have this would be a 7/7, and that would be a 4/4 in there. So with this one here, this Flowering Lumber Knot, you're just looking for something which is going to work well on a 5/5. So either something that's is going to pump it to make it bigger, or something that's going to make it evasive in some way. So you might want to bond it up with your Wingcrafter, so you now have a 5/5 with flying. That would basically give that. We've also got this old gold Shieldmate, which I mentioned earlier, just to go back, which has the hexproof on, as its soul bond ability. So that's useful for protecting something that you don't want zapped with an ability or a spell. And that's the other important point, I think, where the ability in the deck to be able to rebond stuff is really important, because as the game evolves, you might want to use this to protect certain cards, and as the game progresses, you may want to use it to protect other cards. So that's why it's really important to have that ability to switch the soul bond off and then put it back in through the sort of flicker effects. There is another piece of removal in this, which is the acidic slime. Well, in fact, actually it's the only piece of removal, apart from obviously the creature's ability to remove stuff, in that this will destroy a target artifact, enchantment or land when this comes into play. It also has Death Touch on it as well. Geist Trappers has Soul Bond, and when this is paired, both creatures have reach, so it's a good sort of defensive spell, defensive creature. But the good thing with it is it's not a defender. So in combination with one of the pump type soul bonds, it's going to pump this creature up, so it can do a good amount of damage. And this is one of the key cards in the deck, if not the key card, is Wolfear Silverheart. This is definitely one that cries out to have multiple copies of. This will soul bond and then give itself and the creature it's bonded with +4/+4. It's going to make it an 8/8, and it's going to make some of the other creatures in here very, very dangerous. It's interesting to basically pair it up with a Wingcrafter, so you would now have an 8/8 with flying. But again, you've got to find ways of protecting that Wingcrafter if you've got it out. So you may want to wait with your Wingcrafter until you're in a position to be able to cast both of them. Vorst Claw is a plain vanilla 7/7 for 6. And again, you might want to swap this out with something that has Soul Bond, just to basically make the deck a bit more interesting, a bit more flexible. But with a 7/7, if you Soul Bond that with, say, the Wolfear Silverheart, it's going to become very large. It's going to become an 11/11 on that. Pathbreaker Worm, as long as a Pathbreaker Worm is paired with another creature, both creatures have Trample. So that's a 6/4 for 6. So interesting one to pair up with something that pumps. So you've got the pumping ability and the trample in combination, and then you know, getting towards the end of the game, you start doing things like overrun with that, and it's game over for your opponent. And then finally we've got another card which has a flicker ability on, Deadeye Navigator, fairly high cost, 6 mana for a 5/5, and if this is paired, it basically allows you to cast flicker on the creatures that are paired, so you can bounce them in and out of the exile zone and then repair them, rebond them. So that's the deck, just going through it. So things that pair well together, Tandem Lookout and Latch Seeker, obviously I've mentioned. The Flowering Lumberknot and anything with Soulbond, because obviously it doesn't work, doesn't do really much anything without Soulbond. But again, you've got a 5/5 creature there, so you want to look for things that exploit either having a 5/5 with some sort of evasion so it can get through and hit the opponent, or something that's going to pump it, you know, to basically help you out there. Having Warfare Avenger's flash ability is going to basically give you a flash on Soulbond, flash Soulbond on an unsoulbonded creature. Your Joint Assaults obviously work well with your Soulbond. Nephilia Smuggler and Deadeye Navigator have got that flicker ability on them. And then yeah, looking to basically increase your Warfare Silver Hearts, maybe looking to things that enhance the comes into play abilities or triggering because creatures come into play. Things like Soul of the Harvest, which is a creature that works well with the fact that you've got creatures coming into play, because it's a very heavy creature deck. And then you might want to play around with things like Descendants Path in the deck, but again with a enchantment like that, you need to work out what the implications are to your deck and your hand by having something that's triggering every turn. So that's the other thing, is just watch out when you've got stuff triggering, because you can also trigger against you if you're not really careful with the effect of the trigger. So yeah, that's it. That's the Bound by Strength deck. Thanks for watching.